noted for putting up almost anything to make money off it.
Yeah, that's the whole problem. Hey, Bruce, we're going to go for break for 2.5 minutes. Okay. So, if you want to get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever you have to do, we'll be back in 2 minutes. We got Bruce Maccabee on talking about UFOs, disclosure, and all that. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio with me, Gary.
Selfish and cruel since his youthful days in school. His siblings he never did treat well. His self-centered bent was his dark side lament, with a focus on hypnotize and spell. He memorized laws to help sharpen his claws for a future for which he was bent. The time would surely come when for office he would run and claim he was just heaven sent.
Another politician has just taken center stage. He tells all the people that he loves them so. He comes on like a sage, says with him they should engage. A false prophet selling endless empty prose.
Stepped over dead bodies on his climb to the top. The highest post was his aspiration, but he forgot to read the fine print in the contract that he signed, which caused a U-turn to his final destination. He continued on his pathway of destruction and decay, never thinking that his wicked life would end. He never did take stock that the devil is not mocked, and all those broken fences will not mend.
Another politician has just taken center stage. He tells all the people that he loves them.
Roof of Broadcasting Building. I'm speaking from the roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchison River Parkway is still kept open for motor traffic. Void bridges to Long Island hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago.
Coming to you from some far point station, like a cosmic tumbleweed, both north and south of the Pleiades. Here's your host, Gary Anderson.
Oh, I had to wait till that thunder went away. We got Bruce Maccabee on. Bruce, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah, well, what did you think about that thunderstorm I had on there? Anyway, I got James Kirschbaum. He has some questions he wants to ask you, if you don't mind.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Hey, Bruce. How you doing? This is James. Hey, I wanted to know if you heard anything about... I seen a documentary last night, and it was about the Nimitz, and it was about a seaman who was on there 14 years earlier in 1991, and they had what they call a lockdown where they have all lights out, and he got stuck outside because they locked it down and he couldn't get back in. And he described what he seen was a black triangle that was hovering halfway out of the water and halfway into the water, no sound and motionless, just sat there at, halfway in, halfway out before it took off. And he had mentioned that afterwards they had, men in suits had asked him of what he's seen, what happened while he was out there, and he denied everything, not seeing anything. I was just curious if you'd heard anything about that.
No, I haven't. But, of course, there are stories of UFOs coming up out of the water, going down into the water.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Some high-speed objects detected underwater. Now, I have an interesting source of this story. Vladimir Ozhaja, who is a Soviet nuclear sub-captain, he told me he was the first guy to sail a Soviet sub under the Arctic ice cap back in the late 50s, early 60s. The Nautilus did it, our sub, the Nautilus did it in 57 or 58, I think it was. Anyway, this Vladimir Zhazha told me that in the mid-70s he had been directed to collect UFO sighting reports from military people in the Soviet Union. It became his job, sort of. And he in a sort of a limited hangout way, he went public a little bit with what he had. But I met him in 1990, and he told me this story. He says there was a Russian submarine somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, don't know where. It was traveling along at some modest depth, I suppose, and some normal, slow, modest speed. And they became aware that there was something paralleling them a few hundred or a few thousand feet to one side. And the first thought of the captain of the sub, I don't know his name, the first thought of the captain of the sub was that the American sub was coming along and tracking them. And so he went through zigzag, jinking, and so on maneuvers to try to shake the American sub, and he couldn't. So he got mad and decided yell at the American sub or something, I don't know what he was going to do, scream at us. And he went up to the surface. This other thing went up to the surface too. He went up onto the conning tower after the submarine got up through the surface of the ocean. He got up on the conning tower, started looking around in the direction that this other thing had been, expecting to see an American sub pop up, and they would exchange pleasantries or throw rotten eggs at each other or whatever they do in a situation like that. And he says, according to this sub-captain, as relayed to me by Captain Zhazha, the submarine captain saw something come up out of the water, big disc-shaped object. It came up out of the surface, sort of did a wobbling, like it was trying to shake off water, and zipped away at high speed. Well, the Russian Soviet sub guy knew then that wasn't any American craft, so he resumed his trip in a normal fashion. But this is one of the stories that there's a guy, Vladimir Zhazha, picked up when he was directed to collect UFO stories from Soviet military. And that's a pretty definitively not American-made object that could do that.
Yeah, really. I think there's so much more research we need to do in the USOs. I think there's a lot going on underneath our oceans. I just do, and I'm sure there's a lot of reports out there we just haven't heard yet. And I look for more of them maybe coming out too. What do you think about those?
More what? You're looking forward to what?
On more information or releases on USOs, UFOs underneath the oceans.
Oh, well, maybe. There certainly are stories. I recall one, I think a story of tracking some underwater object in the Navy, a surface Navy service vessel. A surface Navy vessel using sonar was tracking something underneath in the area so-called tongue of the ocean near the Bahamas. And it was traveling at 100 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour or something like that. Impossible speed for any submarine that we make.
Yeah, I think the fastest submarine we have can get up to, like, if you figure out knots to miles per hour, they can travel, I think, something close to like 50 miles an hour for a short period of time.
Yeah, I was going to say 35 knots.
Yeah. So, I mean, something going at that speed, it has to be technology far superior than anything of ours. Yeah, I just, Preston Demmett, has his theory about UFOs coming out of, around California and going through tunnels and all that stuff. I don't know. I think we're in a situation right now with the Navy coming out, and I don't know why they, all of a sudden admitted to it. I don't know if it's tied in because if memory is right, isn't Navy now a new base now for the Space Force?
Is the Navy? What did you say?
The newly created service, the Space Force.
Space Force, right?
Yeah, is detached to the Navy now.
I'm not surprised. The Navy was the biggest user of space back in the late 50s and early 60s. The Navy had more satellites up than anybody else. And it was Navy pilots who were the first astronauts.
Yeah, I always thought it was the Air Force, but then, it makes sense. You have all the services. Doesn't the Navy have the biggest budget? So I guess they could, absorb it. I mean, all the rest of the, like the Air Force is complaining that the Pentagon is actually complaining that the Army, the Marines, not the Marines, the Army and the Air Force had their budget stripped to help build the wall, and the Navy wasn't even touched.
Maybe we can hire some UFOs to use some of their magic to either build a wall or create a multi-dimensional wall or something like that.
Yeah. So, what's your feeling? What's going to happen in this coming year and next year in ufology?
Well, now that the Navy has admitted that there's something real, we'll probably start getting reports out of the Air Force as well. Not so many, maybe, from the Army. But
well, I think it's about time that, it's just, are they, you think, preparing the people for something in the near future? Like, saying that these things are really here and we don't know what to do about them?
I think the Navy may well have a program, a secret program going on like they were claiming for the AATIP program, which is actually spending time trying to understand these things. Because after all, if it is technology that's something we can grab onto, whoever has flying saucers first wins.
Well, I mean, if Bob Lazar, if you believe his story, we supposedly have been back engineering UFOs for many years. His story has never wavered, but, I don't know. Maybe we have. Maybe some of these UFOs that we're seeing are actually ours.
Well, people have made a lot of this element 115 that he was talking about before we created it. When he started talking about element 115, I guess the largest element number might have been 110. The 92 natural elements, the ones with the atomic numbers that are greater than 92, tend to decay into lower levels and go away. That's why we get atomic numbers, elements up to 92, and beyond that, 93, 94, 95. They have to be made, and they get made by bombarding atoms with high-speed particles that get fastened on to the nuclei and get heavier and heavier as you add more and more protons onto the nucleus. And all these molecules or atoms that have been created since are normal in the sense that they have they don't do anything fantastic. Element 115 is made up of protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and electrons are on the outside, just like element 114 and element 117 and 116 and all that, even higher. Now, protons and neutrons and electrons of the atoms below 115 can do certain things, but nothing like you can't make tons of them or even pounds of them to use in propulsion units. And even if you could, the story about element 115 is somehow it affects gravity. there's no reason to expect it to affect gravity any more than any other element.